Gets me every time. Alright guys, today I'm going to be talking about whether or not the iPhone 5 is still worth it in 2016. Now, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe because that stupid video I put in the beginning of this took a lot of time and it didn't even turn out well. So please subscribe to make me feel better. And another thing, this is not a review. I'm just going to be talking about strictly whether or not this phone is still worth it in 2016. Now, the size is one thing that this phone has going for it. Now, you can see I'm comparing it to my Galaxy S4 that came out a year later after this iPhone. And the size is one thing that this phone, people want a smaller phone. And with the iPhone SE coming out, obviously there's a big demand for it. Now, it has a 4-inch screen. The resolution is 640 by 1136. So it's not HD. At the time, it was pretty good. But nowadays, it's kind of on the low end. The pixel density, however, is 326, which is still pretty high. And it's an IPS LCD, but it's kind of Retina too. I don't really understand what that is. And I would recommend getting the black version of this phone. As you can see, I have the white one, and it's not the worst looking one, but a black one just looks more professional and more sleek. And the screen doesn't really it kind of looks like the whole front is a screen, and it actually looks pretty sweet. Now, internally, I have 16 gigabytes in this version, and you can honestly find a version like an 8 or 16 or even 32 gigs for about less than $100, which is pretty awesome because you can get that full iOS experience with FaceTime, iMessage, all those things for a budget, and it's pretty awesome. The whole interface of this phone is pretty wicked. I mean, it only has a dual-core processor. It's the A6 Apple chip. It's clocked at 1300 megahertz, and it only has a gig of RAM, which is pretty crazy because of how smooth this phone is. Camera-wise, we're looking at an 8-megapixel rear-facing camera. It's pretty good. You can take pretty decent outside shots with a bunch of light. It's pretty sweet. Low-light shots aren't going to be the best, but obviously you have all these features that iOS comes with. This phone actually does not have slow-mo, so that is a disclaimer. The front-facing camera is 1.2 megapixels. It's pretty good. As you can see, I'm taking a photo of my beautiful face that I have covered because I don't want you guys stalking me. So it's pretty good. It's obviously better than any Android phone that came out in 2012 or 2013 even. Camera-wise, the camera on these two, the front and rear, are pretty sick. Gaming-wise, now, like I said, this phone has a dual-core processor clocked at 1300 megahertz, and it's pretty crazy because this phone only has a gig of RAM, and it can run Temple Run, Fruit Ninja, Dual Jump, all your basic games very, very smoothly. But when it comes to Call of Duty, Need for Speed, Dead Trigger, Need for Speed, I think I said that twice, it's sick because it plays those games at like very few drop frames, so it can handle high intensity games and low intensity games. And it's just crazy because my Galaxy S4 that came out a year later after this has a hard time playing Dead Trigger, long load times and stuff. I wish I could pull up some footage of that, but it's crazy because of how old this phone is. It's like 3 years old, almost 4 years old, and it can still handle games that are made to this day. Multitasking is one of those things that this phone really does shine at. As you can see, I'm scrolling through, and right when I get through I click an app, it takes me right to where I left off, and that's something that my Galaxy S4, my LG G2 had a hard time doing. And it's crazy because those phones had like double the amount of RAM that it does. It's just what the iOS software is capable of. And like I said, the size is one thing that it has going for it because the iPhone SE came out, and obviously Apple saw that there's a huge market share of people who don't want a large iPhone. They want the same iPhone with the same amount of specs and whatever. Now, even though the specs are not comparable, I would say that you're going to have a hard time noticing any differences. Battery life on this phone was pretty wicked as well. Now, it only has a 1440 milliamp hour battery, but even though this phone is 4 years old, I would still say this battery is pretty good. If you get an iPhone that has bad battery life, you could always replace it, which is kind of a tedious process. But I'm on 69% and I have an hour and a half of usage. Now, because this is an iOS ROM, it doesn't have like TouchWiz based bloat or LG UI based bloat. So that's one thing good about having an iPhone, is that your phone doesn't come bloated with all this junk. It does have a rear-facing speaker. Even though there's two grills, it's kind of like what the Nexus 5 did. It only has one that's actually a speaker. It's pretty loud. Obviously, it's just a speaker, so it's rear-facing, so it's better than anything back-facing. And that kind of concludes this whole video. Would I recommend this phone? Definitely. I would definitely recommend this phone to someone who is looking for a budget type of phone that doesn't want it to be huge but still can handle all basic tasks and still have all those features that the iPhone iOS ecosystem can offer. One thing I would like to note though is that the iPhone 5 is kind of outdated a little bit in specs. So even though this phone is good to like right now in 2016, I'm not really sure how long it could last you. Maybe for another, maybe a year even, until, you know, Apple just literally drops software updates, and then you're stuck on an update that's like so crappy. I know you guys are going to disagree with me on this, but I believe on some occasions that big software manufacturers kind of push updates to kind of make your phone seem kind of crappy, so you will go and get the newer version of that phone. Samsung is kind of notorious of that, and Apple is notorious of that too. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If you would like a certain update that this phone is on, I would say just keep it on that. There's really no reason to update it past that. This phone is freaking awesome. You can pick one up for around less than $100 on eBay. Go pick yourself one up if you like small, compact iPhones. One thing Android doesn't do well is that when they go to a more budget phone, specs kind of drop off. But one thing about this phone is that specs are intact for at least a year now, I would say, and you have no problem keeping this phone and using it for your daily driver. I hope you guys like this video. Please subscribe, please comment. I will hopefully see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.